welcome back to Naval Action and episode 22 of A Letter to the King. For those of you new to the series, A Letter to the King is my attempt to keep us all up to date with what's going on PvP-wise on PvP Euro Server 1. And without further ado, let's get stuck in. Before I do, a little bit of a profanity warning. There may be the odd cuss word used in today's Letter to the King. Alright, let's have a look at where we were in the previous week. If you recall, the Antilles Treaty and the Three Admirals Treaty was still holding here, basically tying the Danes, the Swedes and the French from biffing each other, and the Dutch from biffing each other in this neck of the woods. And also the Brits, the Dutch and the Spanish had agreed to a relative state of détente over here. This left the Americans and the Spanish swinging at each other. The pirates had taken an absolute shellacking across the map. The Danes and the Brits were having a little bit of a go at each other. Outside of that, there wasn't much action. It was sort of winding down a little bit after 5 or 6 weeks of pretty hardcore PvP. And the reason it was winding down was the new patch was coming, and the new patch was going to bring alliances. We'll be covering alliances in a fair amount of detail later on. So there was some port swapping that happened this week, but it was all fairly limited. The pirates retook the north of Cuba here. It was almost a port a night across the 6 or 7 nights of the week. They also retook a few of their islands just north of their capital, Mortimer. The Dutch and the Brits did a little bit of port swapping, and the Brits did push along the coast of Haiti, forcing the Danes back. And interestingly enough, the Danes, who have one of the most skilled, or a few of the most skilled fleets in the game, they truly can bring the biff. Their fourth-rate fleet, when coordinated, is arguably one of the best fourth-rate fleets in the game. And there was a couple of nights where the Brits expected them to show, and they didn't. So I don't know, perhaps there's some holiday event in Daneland. Or perhaps there is some trouble within the nation itself, but the normal protagonists that one would see wouldn't be turning up. Now, other than that, there's been very little port battles. What there has been is absolutely splendid open world PvP ganking and biffing. So all around Jamaica, it's home delivery. Everybody brings it. We even had the Swedes down last night, doing a bit of slap and tickle around Jamaica. We've also we always get visited by pirates, bless them, and Spanish and French. And of course the favour is returned. There's always fighting going on around Mortimer. There's always fighting going around off Havana. Plymouth has become the new bloodstain on the map when it comes to random acts of violence. So plenty of open world, and I'll cover that in a little bit more detail as well. But I think what we need to do this week is get stuck into alliances. So first of all, there was the player-made alliances. Now, as of really the publishing of this week's Letter of the King, which will come out at the start of what you Northern Hemisphere folks might refer to as Monday. Of course, you're in the past for us. Us Antipodean types. Then the Antilles Treaty is now null and void, so the gloves are off. And the Dutch, the French, the Swedes and the Danes, there is no more treaty in this area at all. It is on for young and old. There's a little bit more confusion as to what's happening with what was referred to as the Three Admirals Treaty, which was basically the Brits and the Spanish with Dutch cushioning, just agreeing not to take ports off each other anymore. This didn't stop the Americans and the Spanish from going gangbusters, but it did mean that the Brits wouldn't jump in on port battles and attack the Spanish anymore, although the Brits were helping to defend US ports, not in enormous numbers, but in meaningful numbers. It's be interesting to see how this holds. After the first round of alliance voting, Not much changed, but it looks like the Brits and the Americans are about to ally, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And we'll have to see what that means. So who knows? Let's look at the new alliance mechanic. Now, I'm going to do a video later in the week to explain this. It's one of these things that it appears a bit complicated, but it's not really. And it's also in test mode, and it's also really only half implemented. And the reason it's only half implemented is because this is really the left-hand side of the new alliance and conquest model. So until they change the way you take ports and introduce regions, this is kind of half working. But fundamentally, depending on your rank, you get a number of votes. So if you are a rear admiral, you get 9 votes for who you want to be your ally and 9 votes for who you want to be your enemy. Equally, if you're like a lower ranker, and I think it's rank 4 and above, for each level of rank you get a vote. So a level 4 would have 4 votes for friends and 4 votes for enemies. And if we look at how we were after the first round, now fundamentally you're meant to vote what it will be eventually is every 3 weeks. Because it's in test mode, it's in a sort of accelerated mode at the moment. So the first round's only lasted 2 or 3 days, and then you're going to have to vote every 7 days. And the rules are relatively simple. You can have alliances. Your nation can be allied with up to 2 other nations. Your nation can be at war with as many other nations as choose you as their enemy. But when you choose an ally, in order for you to ally, that ally has to choose you in the same round. That alliance stays for, at the moment, 7 days. It's 9 days for the first round, but then it'll be 7 days from then on. Until they put it into the more permanent mode where it will stay for 3 weeks. So fundamentally, once it's fully implemented, every 3 weeks there'll be a round of voting. And when you vote, you might give 1 vote to be an ally, for example, with the United States. And you might not like Denmark. This is the British voting screen. So you might give 1 vote to say you don't like Denmark. Now, what you have to realise is that this is the net outcome. So you'll see here, for example, 621 votes to be Sweden's enemy, to make Sweden our enemy. But that actually could be 1,000 votes for and 379 votes against. What you're seeing there is the net position. So you can see that the British at the moment allied with their friends, the Dutch, and that expires in 8 days. That'll become a 3-weekly thing. And they don't like the French. Very surprising. The first time the Brits have ever had a problem with the French. And that too will expire in 8 days. And so unless they're in the third round, the Brits don't vote to maintain these things, they'll reset. Now, the interesting thing at the moment is although war means they are your dedicated enemy, the Brits could still attack Spanish ports right now. There's no lockout on that. I assume that's going to change. Speaking to one of the devs, what will happen is your rewards for attacking a nation you were at war with, so if you were to take part in a battle against the French in open world or take one of their ports, there will be a multiplier to the rewards you get, both money-wise and loot-wise. So you'll see here that the Brits, they love the Americans and they want to become good buddies with the Americans, and they really don't like the Danes. They're a bit annoyed at the Swedes, and there's a little bit of antagonism towards the Spanish. So this is the Brit view. Obviously your nation will have its own view, and looking at this, the Brits intend to ally with the Americans. And that will happen if the Americans choose to ally with the Brits. So let's have a look at the grid. Now this looks more complicated, but it's not. If you read across here, that's the same information we've just seen, just in a different format really. It shows we are currently allied with our lovely Dutch friends. We don't like the French. And as I mentioned, we really want to go to war with the Danes. We're a bit peeved with the Swedes, and there's still a couple of grumpy monkeys with the Spanish. However, so if we look here again, we'll focus on the Brits just to keep things simple. Here's the Brits. 2,406 want to buddy up with the US. If we now look at the US's line, we'll see that the majority of US players want to buddy up with the Brits. So in the next round, which I think is tomorrow, that will become an alliance. The US will declare war on France, and the Brits will mostly declare war on the Danes. Now, you have to have a partner in order for an alliance to form. So if the US had decided that they would rather ally to the Dutch, then basically nothing would happen, because the Dutch aren't choosing the US and the Brits aren't choosing, the US wouldn't have been choosing the Brits. So let's try and summarise that for you. I will do a video specifically on how all this works. I'm kind of rushing through it a bit at the moment. Let me summarise it for you using my classic Pixar-like graphics. So here we go. I've worked all night on this, so you better bloody like it. So after round one, what happened was the Brits made a deal to become best buddies with the Dutch. Pardon me. Meanwhile, the French and the Danes have voted to become allies. Now, round two, assuming it goes the way it looks like it's going, we'll see the following happen. The US will now become buddies with the Brits. It's important to note you can't ally with somebody who is at war with one of your allies. So the Americans have chosen to ally with the Brits. If the Brits had been at war, if let's say the Spanish tried to join in an ally with the Brits, they wouldn't be able to do that because their allies, the Americans, are at war with the Spanish. So to become allies, the two of you have to vote for each other in the same round, and you can't have an enemy. Okay, so you can't have a common enemy. You can't have an enemy become an ally. Now, over here, let's have a look. We've got the Swedes allying with the Danes. Who'd have thought that would ever happen in a bajillion years? Thank you, pirates. No, it's not the pirates' fault. What's happened is the Swedes, and I tip my hat to the Swedes. I've always been a bit of a fan of the Swedes just because they're sort of the little train that did. They're a relatively small nation with a highly competent fleet, but they can really only defend one port at a time at the moment. Maybe their player base will grow. And the Swedes have decided to really break out from their historic allies and join their historic enemies as a form of game balance. So one of the things, I'll just go back to the previous thing. One of the things some people have said is that if you add these numbers up, you can tell how big the nations are. So for example, if you added all the greens up, you can tell how big a nation is. Now that's sort of a bit true. It's sort of, you can tell the sizes. It's a bit like comparing perhaps a apple to a tennis ball to a ping pong ball, but you won't get an exact measurement, because if the Danes were very split in their opinion and 500 of them have voted to fight against Spain, but 689 had voted to love Spain, you would see 189 here. So that wouldn't show you the fact that there's 689 casted votes to get to that net score. But what you can do is if you add up all the greens for each nation, that will give you a bit of a feel for the size of a nation. And fundamentally, the Brits are probably twice as big as their nearest rival as far as size is concerned. The US and the Spanish are probably about the same size. The Swedes are possibly the smaller of all the nations. The Spanish, like I say, are probably about the same size as the US. But these are only the people who bothered to vote, and it's their net vote. So you can't guarantee that the numbers of people are just by simply adding up those votes. And don't forget that, like, anybody below rank 4 doesn't get to vote, and if you're at rank 4, you've only got 4 votes to cast versus rank 9, so you'd have 9 votes to cast. So back to this. So the Spanish, the Danes and the Swedes have buddied up, and the Spanish have buddied up with the French. So fundamentally, we have these two blocks. So it's a bit similar to how it was before. But it's a little bit different, of course, because now the British can build a port inside a Dutch port. And the British could defend that port inside the port battle, and the British could sail with the Dutch to attack a French port. The British cannot craft a flag from a Dutch port right now. I'm pretty sure they could build a building in there, but the risk would be in another week if the alliance isn't agreed on. Then your ships would be locked out. So that's a bit interesting, isn't it? I wonder how you get your ships back if that happens. I'd imagine it would be a server reset thing and you'd just have to predict it. We'll see how that one goes. And of course the pirates are a wild card. What will the pirates do? Will they become guns for hire? Will they maintain, for example, their close ties with the Spanish, which they've demonstrated? Will they carry on pounding the Swedes, who they seem to have some antagonism towards? So very interesting to see what happens to the pirates. And the pirates are very much out there on their own, which is kind of how they should be. They're not part of the nation stuff, but they are sort of still, as we might say, waiting for content. Some of the other interesting things, of course, that's come up from this. So first of all, we had Sweden swap for a bit of balance. And that's I've been chatting away with a few folks about this. And of course, there's the role-playing element. Oh, the traitors, I can't believe they've changed sides. And yes, I quite enjoy the role-playing part of it. So, grrr, Sweden, you dirty bastards, we gave you safe harbour and now you've turned on us. But at the same time, you don't want it to stay the same. Let's imagine that one side became dominant and week after week the same side won. What would happen? I mean, it'd be bad. They're talking about in the long run having seasons, so after 3 months the map would reset. But if the same old alliance is formed and the same side would win, it would go stale, wouldn't it? So we do need a bit of a reason to swap and move around to keep it all interesting. So from a balance and fun perspective, well done, Sweden. From a role-playing perspective, you bastards. You dirty bastards. The other interesting thing is that we also have quite a split in player time zones now. All of these guys here play very tightly on a European timer, and I'll show you how you can see that. This is a fantastic site I use. It tells you when all the port timers are. And so if we look, for example, at Britain, you can attack Great Britain anytime you want. It never rests. It's the kingdom that keeps on giving when it comes to port battles. But if you were to want to have some biffo with our Swedish friends, sorry for the scrolling, all of their ports are on the same timer. Alright, so basically they just have to log on after whatever they watch on Swedish TV, Cattle in the Cold, episode 76, and How to Steal from Your Neighbour, in classic Viking, not saying you're all thieves, classic Viking fashion. And after they've watched those 2 episodes, they can defend for 2 hours and then they can all go to bed. So they're really just in this time zone here. And if you look around, you'll see that, you know, the US are obviously in the US time zone predominantly. The Danes very tightly in a box here. The Dutch, you know, huge concentration. The Brits. So the Brits have got a huge population, but they're spread across the 3 time zones. So that's an advantage and a disadvantage. The French, very much in these 2 time zones. The Spanish are quite split, but focused again in this European time zone. And the pirates, well, they haven't got many ports left, but they're focused again very tightly in the European time zone. It's a European server, eh? However, this alliance here is very much in the European time zone. This alliance here is Euro time zone, portions of Euro time zone, plus portions of US time zone, plus portions of Oceanic time zone. So if these guys here grab up some of these ports, it's only fair that they put them on their own time zones, and then we will have the QQ and the sad wow-wows. We have to bite our tongue a little bit, because 4 to 6 weeks from now, flags will be gone, port timers will change. Let's see how that goes. So that's alliances right now, and really it kicks off today. How excitement. Let's see how things go, and where will the biff be? Well, we'll talk about that a bit later. I can't really do a weekly report without talking about the amazing weekly event. So there were 2 secret underpants things in the recent patch. One was these secret events. So during the week, people were finding letters which they were capping off traders that said, oh, there's a treasure fleet coming. And we all thought, oh, excellent, we're all going to get our Agamemnon and L'Océan and heavy rattler BPs, and all of our paint is going to come. And so for the week, there was all of these hints about where that there were these fleets coming and we had to protect them. There was actually a couple of letters that then dropped with weather warnings that sort of inferred to you that that these fleets would be somewhere around the Gulf of Mexico. Sadly, the players who got those never read them, shared them, and probably deleted them. So in the end, the devs had to publish that letter warning on the forums, and they did so a good 2 or 3 hours before. And so those of us mad enough, me especially, woke up, or I didn't wake up, I just didn't go to bed, and I stationed myself around the Gulf. I triangulated between the free ports that were mentioned in the weather, and I actually picked, I was around here. I'd done some silliness with trying to work out what all the temperatures were, and I'd convinced myself it was here at 81, 88 or something like that. Now, the event eventually popped and it was here. So as soon as it pops here, anybody who didn't prepare themselves are now 2 hours sail. So this entire half of the map is out of it. It's an hour and a half sail from here. It's 2.5 hours sail from here. So if you didn't prepare yourself, if you were in Australia and you're not an idiot, you'd have been in bed. Go away. You'd have been in bed. So this event was on. What happened was a big thing came up here, which was like a big shipwreck symbol. And I was only 20 minutes away due to my high preparedness. Sadly, I was in a Trader's Links. I was in a Trader's Links because it's fast, and my job was to find the convoy that I thought we were going to have to escort, and then call in my clannies who were stationed around. However, we discovered they were wrecks, and I sailed to the wreck and discovered that you needed 250 tons of hold to pick stuff up, so I could only pick up 1 box. Others were coming in Le Gros Ventures, and they could pick up like 10 boxes. There were 16 wrecks. Each wreck had up to 15 dead man's chests on. When you picked up a dead man's chest, you couldn't open it at sea, you couldn't teleport, you had to go to a port. You had 3 hours to open it, otherwise it exploded and killed all your crew, or whatever. I don't know what happened if you didn't open it. So anyway, most of you will have seen my hilarious stream. I sailed away to what we call Islamic Sneeze, or Achaflaflyer, and opened my box, and I got some purple Pello sights. Not quite the first-rate BP I'd been hoping for, or even a bucket of paint. And I was a bit sad, as were many others. And of course, after only 15 to 20 minutes, all of the wrecks had been emptied of their booty. Now, there was an incredible amount of disappointment and an incredible amount of angriness. I was, because I made some positive comments about the event, I was basically told to choke to death on some developer's cock. Which, first of all, you should never use oral sex as an insult. Oral sex should be applauded in all its forms. And secondly, it amazes me, the interwebs. I don't mind about getting some bad stuff, but it just amazes me as a social experiment. Imagine if your washing machine broke and you invited the washing machine guy around and he turned up late and then he couldn't fix it. Imagine if you told him face to face that you wished he would choke on some cock. I can only imagine 3 things happening from that. You would end up with some washing machine repair implements embedded in various orifices. Or if you were particularly biffy, you yourself would probably be in trouble for assault. And you would probably never get your washing machine fixed again if you survived that interaction. So it just amazes me the sort of things people say. And a couple of the devs were online, and Jesus, the piss and vinegar. We want the devs in the chat. So you don't have to lie. I mean, you know, you can't please all of the people all the time, but you certainly on the internet seem to be able to piss everybody off. So as an event went, I thought it was a bit disappointing loot-wise. The devs were hugely disappointed that we didn't all PvP. They expected us all to PvP. And the reason we didn't PvP is those of us with boxes wanted to run away. Those of us heading into the area didn't know who had a box on, didn't want to get caught in a 1 hour's drawn-out engagement. What they wanted to do was get to a wreck and get some loot. So the psychological shenanigans basically meant it was in nobody's best interests, while there was still hope of loot being on one of the ships, that you would loot some loot. The location pissed off everybody over towards the Antilles. Now, let's take a step back and think about this event. It was a test. Now, collecting the notes was interesting. The clues about where it was were genuinely fun, and everybody was trying to work out. I had mates who were converting the temperatures, one into Fahrenheit and one into Celsius, and working out grid things. We were trying to do anagrams on the names of things and stuff. There's all sorts of stuff going on. That was good fun. Racing to it was good fun. The excitement of picking up a chest was good fun. The excitement of running the chest back to harbour was good fun. I think perhaps our expectations were a bit high because we'd been waiting. We all want a Leocian, we all want an Agamemnon, we all want a heavy Renome, and we all want one of the roll-on, roll-over gunboats because they're hilarious and pointless, but hilarious. So our expectations were high. We didn't know that there was going to be a finite number of boxes. The devs did. We didn't know that. We thought if we spent 2 hours sailing there, we'd get a reward. Well, we know that now. I actually think that the worst loot on there should be a paint job. The paint jobs they're like mods. They're like permanent mods. You can fit them to one ship. So we should have got a paint job, you bastards. I think having a finite number is fine. I don't want welfare epics. I like the idea that these some of these blueprints will perhaps for the first month or two be quite rare, and then they'll just become part of a discoverable blueprint. I like that as a way of bringing ships into the game. I think that's great. They're really precious to start off with. Everybody shouldn't get one on day one. I like that. I'm not one for welfare epics, never have been. I'm an old World of Warcraft man, and when they started giving out welfare epics left, right and centre, it just deters you from, putting effort in to get something. I want to be rewarded. I want to be sailing around in my new sexy time ship of the line and everyone going, ooh, look at him. That's good. That's what I want. I'm not sure about people coming along in a big trader and being able to pick up 10 chests. I think you should be limited to 1 or 2 chests. I think if you pick up a chest, you should have like a flag, like you do when you're carrying a conquest flag, a flag on your head. And then people will attack you, and then that'll be exciting. And then you'll have to turn up in a warship, and then you'll have to organise yourselves. So I think that would be good. So I like the idea that you have a conquest flag type of thing, a dead man's curse or something. How exciting would that be? So the next ones are going to happen. They're going to be random. They could appear anywhere. And I think that's how it should be. There is talk they're going to raise the loot level a bit, and that would be good. I think there should be at least a paint job in every chest, because who wants a purple Pello sights? I can make gold Pello sights, for crying out loud. Pello sights are wonderful. Every man should have a set of Pello sights. Purple Pello sights after a fucking 2-hour sail, after 3 hours of setting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, event, 8 out of 10. I liked it. Loot rewards, 2 out of 10. Managing player expectations, 4 out of 10. Expecting the players to PvP and being disappointed when they weren't, when everyone was trying to get hold of a BP. I don't think you put yourself in the player's shoes. I think you imagine that the test event would work as if it was the 15th time it had been run, and it just wasn't right. In hindsight, I think for the launch, you should have had an event over here and an event over here, and there should have been a bit more than normal in there, and blueprints all not blueprints, buckets of paint all round, and keep the blueprints rare for the first 2 to 1 or 2 months. And that's about it, except for the other secret feature is the prey. And it's prey for the devs, because the treatment that they've got in chat has been awful. The treatment in forums has been awful. It's a game, guys. Grow the fuck up. And engage with the devs. I'm no dev fanboy. I'm a gamer fanboy. I want the best game ever. Naval Action is one of the most exciting titles that's been developed right now, and we're testing it. I'm no friend of the devs. I used to be a dev. I used to be not a game dev. I'm a programmer by trade. I'm not anymore. I'm an old farty manager now, but I'm a programmer by trade. Most devs are, they're on the autistic scale of human communication techniques. Be nice. We want them in the chat. We want them to engage with us in the forums. If you tell them they've ruined the game and you're going to go and kill 2 children and you're never going to come back and play again and that they're a bunch of bastards, really, grow up a bit. Age of entitlement and all that sort of malarkey is a game. Chill out a bit and enjoy it and give some positive feedback. And I was disappointed. Watch my stream. I was so disappointed. 3 o'clock in the morning. Bastards. But, an hour after that, it was fun. Anyway. Enough of that. Where's the biffo going to be next week? Well, the Antilles should burn. The Brits and the Danes are clearly going to biff. I have no idea what's going to happen around here. Who are the Swedes going to go after? Who are the pirates going to go after? No idea. The Americans and the Spanish are going to be swinging, and will the British get drawn into it? And I hope the open sea ganking continues, because that's been magnificent. One of the things in particular the French have done is a lot of them now run around with, we call it the idiot perk, but it's the social perk. And again, this was another one that was met with all sorts of piss and vinegar in the forums. This is the perk that leaves the battle open for 30 minutes. Well, let me tell you, some of the most fun, hilarious battles are happening around Plymouth now, mostly because guys are running around with the social perk on. 25 versus 25 open world biffos. I was out there last night and my wife went nuts with me, to be honest. 6 hours of non-stop fights. I think there was like 10 minutes sailing between each fight. I was involved in 4 different battles. I was like a 12-year-old. I got dragged off to bed in the end with a warning and a waggly finger. I was having so much fun. And the quality of the fighting's good too. Yes, you get banged by 8-on-1 every now and again, but the French and the Swedes are turning up in this neck of the woods with first rates into these battles. They're risking their pixels. The same as down here, we saw Danes and Spanish and French fleets risking their pixels, all for fun. And it's getting to the point now people are happy to, throw a pixel or 2 away. I've had, 25 hours of good PvP. I think I've lost 5 Joras this week in open world. More than I normally lose in a week of port battle, so fantastic. So let's hope the open world carries on, and let's see how we go. So the tally board this week is really where, this is the new starting point because we've got the new war on. The Brits made a bit of a gain because they took a few ports off the Dutch with some port swapping for timer purposes and took a couple off the Danes as well. The Americans lost a couple to the Spanish. You can see the Spanish making here. I think the pirates took one as well. The Dutch lost a few, mostly Brit port swapping, and a couple around the north of Cuba. The French pretty much stayed the same. The Swedes lost one, which the pirates took towards the close of the week. The Danes lost 3, that was very much to the Brits, and the pirates made some ground back. So this really now is the starting board for the next round of fighting in naval action, and that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please tell me to eat various elements of various genders' genitals in the comments. I look forward to seeing what I shall be choking on this week. Let's be nice to our dev friends. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.